Welcome fellow bookworms to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney and today we have my June wrap up. June was an amazing month. I ended up reading 23 books, which is fantastic. That is definitely more than I normally average in a month, so it was just a really good reading month. And the majority of them were 5 stars again. I know I tend to give out more 5 stars than most people, but I try to really just look at the books for what they are and what my enjoyment was. And so yeah, I had a great month as far as the books I was picking up, and I'm excited to talk about them. I did complete all the books on my game TBR, so I do earn a reward, which this just allows me to forego a honey jar prompt when I'm playing my game. I won't be playing my game again until October because the August is the autumn equinox and I'm participating for the very first time, and then September is my birthday month, so I just want to have a little bit more freedom during September. And so yeah, I'm just really am wanting to play my game, but I know it's for the best that I just hold off until October. But I'll have these rewards waiting. I already have another one over there as well, so now I have 2 that I'll be able to use. It is the day before the 4th when I'm filming this. When this video is going to go up, it'll be the Monday after the 4th, so if you're in the US and you're celebrating Independence Day, I hope you had a good long weekend. Most people are getting a long weekend. I know not everybody, so if you had to work the Friday after the 4th, I know that's not always fun. But a lot of people are getting a long weekend, so I hope you stayed safe and had fun celebrating and everything like that. We don't do anything for the 4th. I don't like the fireworks, so we're just going to stay home and chill. I am really glad that we live out in the boonies now, because I used to hate when I was in town and you would have to deal with fireworks constantly the weekend before and the weekend after, and it was just ridiculous. So I'm really glad I live out in the middle of nowhere and don't have to deal with that anymore. I do miss, though, growing up we would go to 4th of July rodeos and such, which were always fun, which don't do that anymore now I'm an adult. But yeah, happy 4th. And I hope you guys all had a good time. But let's go ahead and get into my stats, and then we'll get to talking about the books. So as far as stats go, I did read 6,254 pages. Physically, I read 19 books. I had 1 digital book and 3 audio books. My audio hours equaled to 35 hours and 25 minutes. All the books were fiction. I did not have any nonfiction. I had 1 reread. My top moods were emotional, dark, and adventurous, which is pretty on par for me. Now, genre-wise, though, I ended up having 7 historical fiction, which generally my top genres are fantasy, romance, and YA, and normally I have a couple historical in there, but I had 7 historical, 5 fantasy, 4 young adult, 4 literary, 3 classics, 3 science fiction, 3 contemporary, 2 middle grade, 2 children's, 2 LGBTQIA, 2 thriller, 2 romance, 2 mystery, 2 manga, 1 dystopian, 1 magical realism, 1 poetry, and 1 horror. So, yeah, so the historicals took the top spot this month. So let's go ahead and get into the books. I always start with anything I didn't get to, or the ones that are going to be rolling over. So the only book I didn't get to at all was The White Bone by Barbara Gowdy. This was for my genre-thon pick, which genre-thon is my readathon that I put on. And for, what was it? June, it was wildfire season, so heating up to read either eco-fiction or a book about nature / conservation. I thought this was like a non-fiction going into it. It doesn't really have any synopsis on the back, just a little blurb. I have ended up starting it, like I said, it's the day before the 4th, so I've read it a little bit the last 3 days, and it is like a fantasy, and it's just weird. I honestly might DNF it. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a chance today. And if I'm still not enjoying it, I'm about 45 pages in, I want to say. Oh, 55, because I read a little bit this morning already. And so yeah, if I'm still not enjoying it, after tonight, I think I'm going to DNF it. It's just really weird. And it's not that, like, obviously I had a different expectation going into it, but basically you have, like, these families of these different elephants, these different communities of elephants. And so, like, you have the she S's, which is where our main elephant is living, but they're like her adopted family because her mom dies when she is a calf first born, and her herd ends up leaving her. And so this other herd takes her in essentially. And so the elephants like are communicating. They have like you have like this elephant Mud, or her elephant name is She Spurns because it's the she S's, so they all have like S names. I don't know. Anyway, so she has visions, and there's another elephant that can basically talk to other animals and like hear the thoughts of the other elephants. And so they have like a little bit of magical, like supernatural abilities as well. And that's all fine and good. Like, I read Dunked in Wood by William Horwood, and it was about these moles, okay? And they can talk and everything, and they have, like, the supernatural elements, but that's all fine and well. Like, I don't mind that. This one's just weird. So yeah, first I had to kind of change my expectations, but even once I did that, it's just weird. Like, it talks a lot about defecation and urination, and, like, they eat the stuff, which is just really weird. It's kind of, like, very choppy and all over the place and confusing. Like, you have these other herd of elephants where I'm at now. And it might be a little bit of a spoiler, but at this point I just want to talk about it. So this other herd of elephant comes, and they basically have been slaughtered by humans, and there's just the one matriarch, her two daughters, and a male elephant that have survived, and the matriarch has like the body of a calf. And I was really confused at first. I thought the calf and this male elephant that was still alive were the same elephant, and so I was like, he's dead, but now he's slowly trailing behind them to the water hole. Like, I thought he was dead, and then I realized, oh, it's two different elephants. So it's not very clear, and it's very choppy as far as the writing goes, and confusing. I do know what the story is about. So basically, you have the dangers from the human, and if there's elephant-like lore and myth and such, and there's this white bone, which is the bone from, I think, a calf, an elephant calf, of a family that also got slaughtered by humans, but that bone, like, as the other bones turned to dust, that bone survived, and it's going to point the way to a safe place, essentially, is the premise of the book. So they're going to try to find this white bone. They just now learned the story of it, so they're not on that track yet. But they're going to find this white bone to find a safe place that's safe from the humans, essentially. And yeah, it's just like the premise of it, okay, I can get behind that. And now that I know it's not a nonfiction and it's about these elephants and they have, supernatural powers and they talk among themselves and such, I can get behind that too. But the writing is just very, very rough. And like I said, and there's weird sexual things as well. So it's not just the urination and defecation and the fact that they're like eating the stuff. It's the sexual, so like the bull elephants tunnel a hole for the calf, a calf tunnel. And so they're diggers into these female elephants, and just weird sexual things, weird things with bathroom habits, and I may DNF this. So, like I said, I didn't even read it last month, but I've started it, and I already have a lot of thoughts on this. So we'll see. You can check back into my July wrap-up to see if I continue on and my full thoughts on this. But right now, that's kind of where I am at, because it's rough. So, then I did have an extra book. I don't know, it's up there. So I don't have the Dust Jacket, but we have Mind Games by Nora Roberts. This is her newest release. Came out the end of May. And I am reading this with my husband. And so we're 108 pages in. We're almost through the first third of the book. It's always broken up into like thirds. We're almost through the first third of the book. We read it mainly at the beginning of the month, and then we kind of dropped off because we read this at bedtime. And so if we get to bed late, we won't read it, and then we both kind of have to be in the mood for it too. So that's kind of hard, but this will be rolling over and we'll just continue reading it slowly until we have completed it. I am enjoying this. Basically, you have this brother and sister, and every month they go, I don't remember the setting, but it's in the Appalachian Mountains. And they go stay with their grandma for like 2 weeks every summer. And so they're up there staying with her, and their parents go back home and they end up getting brutally murdered. Well, the little girl, again, I forget her name, I'm horrible with names. She has this ability, and her grandmother has it as well. And so her and her grandmother both basically witnessed the murder through a dream. The little girl's a little bit more powerful, so the grandmother didn't like fully get everything, but the little girl does. And the information she's able to give the police, they're able to catch the guy. And so right now that's kind of where we're at. Her parents have been murdered, and they're with their grandmother right now. But the killer also has the ability, like, he has been able to sense the little girl in his mind, and he has that ability too. So while he's in prison, he's kind of like fixated on revenge on this little girl. And so that's kind of how the story is going to come out, like when she's an adult and such. It's going to all come back around, but a little bit slow paced so far, but I'm really, really enjoying it. So, and my husband seems to be as well. So that one was just an extra. Like I said, we've been reading her series, because in the spring she has a romantic suspense book standalone that comes out, and then in the autumn she has her series books that come out. And so we're the Lost Bride series is the current one, and the first book has come out. The next book is going to come out in November. And so we've been reading those every year, but now we're going to be reading her romantic suspense together as well. So that's fun. I read aloud and he just listens, unless like that one hit me one night after the whole murder took place and the little boy was talking, and I was just like, I started crying. I was like, okay, you have to read because I can't do it right now. And then, of course, we're still working on the Odyssey. We have finished the Iliad. We're still working on the Odyssey. I read about 96 pages of this month. We have just over 200 pages left to go. And again, I'm just taking my time with this. I'm not in a huge hurry. It is really dense. So I am enjoying the Odyssey, though, way more than I did the Iliad. Right now, it was just about his son, the chapters I read so far. And so I was like, come on, I want to get to the Odysseus's part. So we're kind of at that point now. So we'll see how this next month or next several months go. But yeah, I do. Gonna be continuing that. I am enjoying it. Then we did have one DNF. So the way my star ratings work is any DNFs, I rate 1 star in my journal, and then I don't typically rate those on Goodread or Storygraph because I didn't actually read them. I DNF'd this, especially this book I'm going to show you, because I DNF'd it at 6 pages. However, this book was so problematic that those 6 pages were so problematic that I did actually rate it on Goodreads, because they don't have like a section for DNF. Like, I created a shelf for DNFs, but like on Storygraph, you can put that you DNF'd it, when you DNF'd it, at what point, and why, which I really wish Goodreads had something like that. And so yeah, that book was for the prompt of Hansel and Gretel, which was Sweet Candy Rep. It's not wanting to focus. But yeah, Sweet Candy Rep. And so I did end up doing a book to replace this one, which we'll talk about later. So I did end up fulfilling this prompt, so this won't go back in the honey jar. But the book I had originally picked for it was Forrest Gump by Winston Groom. I grew up with the movie. We watched it all the time. We would always quote it. And so I was like kind of like not super excited, but ready to read this. I knew reading the synopsis that, and when it was published in 1980 something, 84 or 86, I can't remember off the top of my head. Let's see, 86. So it was published in 1986. And the very first line is, being an idiot is no box of chocolates. That's the first line in the book, the first line in the synopsis. And so I knew going in, like, there's going to be outdated terminology, and such. And I expected that. And it's about a character, which you know from the movie, he doesn't have a super high IQ. He is a little bit mentally handicapped. And so I knew going in, like, you have this character and there's going to be outdated terminology. I kid you not. It was 6 pages of just like a derogatory tone using the word idiot, the R word, calling his school, the special school he goes to, the nut school, talking derogatory about the other kids in this school, how they drool and has spasms and such. Like, it was just so derogatory. Like, I get outdated terminology. I can handle that knowing what time period it was written in. But the movie did such a good job at not being like that. Like, you knew he was mentally handicapped and had a low IQ, but it didn't really come across as derogatory. This book, like I said, the first 6 pages is just full of that. And I was just like, no, like, I'm not reading it. Like, I don't know how close it follows the movie or anything, but like, as far as like what he does, getting pulled to do like football and then going to Vietnam and then ping pong and such, like, it was just so problematic. Like, it, even for the time it was written in, like, no, like, I don't mind reading outdated terminology, like knowing what time it was written in, but this was just derogatory. And so yeah, I rated it 1 star on Goodreads, even though I only read 6 pages, because no, not it, not it. So that was my only DNF, so my only 1 star. Then I did have 1 2-star book, and that was for the prompt of a bookworm, and it was higher or lower. And so basically, I got that prompt not from Gavin himself. I think his channel is now Gavin Reads It All, which I just have a hard time remembering that. But anyway, but that's where, I've seen other booktubers do the higher or lower and reference back to Gavin. And so that's kind of where I got this prompt from. And so my lower book, because we got lower, or we failed. So my book that was the one I wasn't as excited for was Neuromancer by William Gibson. And this one, I would needed to read it anyway because it was for my end author for my ABC title challenge, which I'm doing this year. So it was for my end author. I was going to have to read it regardless, because I'm trying to really keep up with that, make sure I'm reading the 2 or 3 a month I need to. And this could have been good, but it just wasn't very accessible. And again, you had like these weird, just like sexual things like thrown in there. I'm like, I don't mind. I read a variety of books. I read some spicy, some like dark romance and such. I don't mind like sexual things, but when they don't really fit and they're just kind of randomly thrown in and just like gross, it's like, why is this even here? Like, what is the purpose of this? So basically in this one, you have the main character. I don't know his name. It doesn't really have a synopsis, and I'm horrible with names, but you have the main character, and he's like, he used to be like a hacker essentially, but he tried to steal from the people that hired him, and they injured him, and so he's not able to do that anymore. But he's kind of part of like the criminal underground essentially. And then this person ends up showing up and heals him, in order, because he wants him to do a job for him essentially. And so you kind of have that criminal underground component, and you have like AI and virtual reality, and this is like supposed to be the father of cyberpunk sci-fi. And yeah, it was just so confusing. Like, you have these constructs, and like sometimes he refers to it as Dixie, sometimes as Flatline, and I didn't know. I think they're the same construct, but I didn't understand. There's a lot of slang usage in here, but he doesn't give you any context for the slang, or very little context for the slang, and like no explanation for what's going on. And like I said, there's just like weird sexual things thrown in here as well, which was just weird. And yeah, the whole criminal underground and kind of like a heist feel to it, because there's this big mysterious corporate family that they're trying to infiltrate and such, to get like this AI, and yeah, like the premise of it and like the whole vibe and criminal, like underground vibe, kind of thriller aspect kind of drew me in, but it was just so hard to get through because I was lost the whole entire time. And so it only got 2 stars from me. I'm not going to be keeping on to this. This is the 20th anniversary edition. It was written in 1984. The 20th anniversary edition was published in 2004, and then I'm obviously was reading it 40 years later. And it's not that it didn't age well. I think overall, especially considering at the time it was written, he didn't know anything about like cell phones or anything like that. And so you have like these scenes with payphones, which was interesting. I think overall it aged fine. It was just not accessible and very confusing. So that one only got 2 stars from me. Then we had 3 stars, and actually in my journal I forgot to write one of them down. And so as I was organizing my books, I was like, where's this book? Yeah, I had forgotten to write it in my journal, and once I put it permanently, like you can't erase anything. So I had to just squeeze it in there. But the lowest 4 star or 3 star book rather, was an extra one. I did play Winnie the Pooh Hunny. Those videos are already out. There's in 2 parts because it was really long. So I'll link that down below. But I did play Winnie the Pooh Hunny, and I got a middle grade or children's book, and I didn't have any on my TBR, so I added this one in. And that is the Berenstain Bear Scouts Save That Back Scratcher by Stan and Jan Berenstain. This was fine. It was cute. It just wasn't all that engaging. I wish it had been focused more like on saving this tree and the historical aspect, but that really came more into play at the end, and it just wasn't as engaging as I would have expected it. So basically, you have the Bear Scouts, and they end up with a new scout leader because their current scout leader decides to run for mayor of the town. So they end up with a new scout leader, who's kind of a stickler, and so she decides they need to earn the scout for a history merit badge, the scout badges. She wants them to earn a history merit badge. And so there's this tree in the town circle, that is historical because the 2 bears signed a treaty during the Bear Wars. The 2 like generals signed a treaty underneath it and then sealed the deal by using it as a back scratcher. Everybody in town, comes over to use it as a back scratcher. And the current mayor is worried about the new mayor, and so he has like a shady business partner, and the shady business partner is like, we'll do a super duper highway through town, and then people will want to still elect you as mayor versus this other person. But in order to build their super duper highway, they're gonna tear down the tree. And so yeah, they have to save the tree, essentially. And I like that aspect. I like the saving the tree and the historical aspect, but it was more about how their new Bear Scout's a stickler and this running for mayor stuff, and not so much about the tree and the history there. And so yeah, I got 3 stars. It was perfectly cute, perfectly enjoyable. I'm definitely gonna probably put this in like a little free library somewhere for a kid. I enjoyed picking it up. I enjoyed reading it, but now somebody else can enjoy it as well. So there's that one. Then the next one is the book I forgot to put on there somehow. And this one we got a bookworm, and it was to read a manga or graphic novel. And so for this one, I went with Death Note Volume 4. This is the black edition, so it has Volume 7 and 8, and this is by Tsugumi, Ohba, and Takeshi Obata. And yeah, I like the premise of these mangas. I enjoyed the first two, especially the first one. Um, but even the second one I enjoyed. The third one I didn't like. There was like this corporate aspect to it that I didn't enjoy. And this one too, it just kind of fell a little short. I did enjoy it more than the third one. But there's just some things that happened in here that didn't really make sense to me. You have some fresh characters coming in, but they're basically the exact same as these other characters, and so it's like they're not really adding anything to the story. You have multiple death notes in play, which it got confusing for me. And so I was kind of confused about the death notes as well. But basically, you have Light, and he finds a Shinigami death note, and when you find one, he can put a name in there, and that person will die of a heart attack. And you can even write, how they die. So if you write how they die, then they die in that way. If you don't, they just die of a heart attack. And so there ends up being this task force created because Light is originally targeting like criminals and such, but this task force is created to try to figure out who this person is that are killing off these people. And his father's on the task force, so he kind of has an in there. And so he's trying to like kind of sabotage as they're trying to figure out. He's kind of trying to sabotage because he obviously doesn't want them to know it's him. And so there's kind of like a cat and mouse type thing going on. And yeah, like I said, those new characters, they didn't really add anything to it. And it was just kind of a little bit repetitive and confusing. And so I did still enjoy it. Like a 3-star is solid. But I just didn't love it. And the ending though always hooks me. Like every book so far, the ending has hooked me and made me okay, like I gotta see what happens next. But then the bulk of it's just kind of lackluster for me. But overall, not bad. I have all of them, so I am gonna continue on. I think there's 7 or 8 total. I can't remember. So I am gonna continue on with it. But yeah, that one was just a little bleh for me. Then we have this one, which this one was for Aurora, and it was Unknown Family. And for that, I went with The Maze of Bones by Riordan. This also worked for one of my Aurelian prompts because I was doing the novice path and my character's background, all the prompts for that. And so I gave myself through June and I did finish all those books as well, but this was one of them. So it worked for my game, it worked for Aurelium. And yeah, I was excited for this series. Basically you have Amy and Dan, and their grandma dies, and they have the option to either them and there's a whole big extended family. They have the option to either take $1 million or get a clue, which will start them on this like scavenger hunt for a treasure that will make them like the most powerful person in the world. And it works for Unknown Family because they didn't realize just how big their family connections extended to a lot of famous and powerful people. I will say I loved it has like a historical figure element, and like this one had Benjamin Franklin as the historical figure, and then it also took him to like the catacombs in Paris. So I like those historical components. I really enjoyed that. I just didn't feel like this was very believable. It's fun, it's fast paced, but just some of the things that were happening didn't feel believable for like the age ranges the characters were. And I understand like the draw, and I understand I'm not the target demographic. I understand the draw for things that are kind of out there and unbelievable, but they basically are orphans, and so their grandma's, like their great aunt is their ward, or their wards of hers, but they live on their own with just an au pair. Their au pair, their current one, is a teenager. I think she's like 18 or 19 though, so like not high school, because I believe she's like in college, but at the same time still a teenager. And then they have like these cousins that are like trying to assassinate them and kill them and such, who are the same age, so they're 14 and 11. And so like why these characters feel intelligent for their age and like highly intelligent and such, they at least feel their age. Their cousins feel like 20-something assassins, but they're supposed to be 14, 11. And then all like these adults from their extended family are trying to kill them too, which I get, it's high stakes, but it's just like every adult, like, come on, like somebody's gonna have some kind of conscience. And I think, if like some of the characters had been a little older, what like the teenage au pair, like she wouldn't be able to rent a car or fly them overseas and such. So like that didn't make sense. And their assassin cousins didn't make sense. And so I think if it had just been like tweaked a little bit to have like a little bit more older characters, or characters that were a little bit less intense, like kind of a balance, where not every single adult is trying to kill them and such, I think it would have worked a little bit better for me. I still really enjoy the story. I love the historical component. I am planning on continuing it. Each one, like I have up to number 6, and each one's written by a different author. And so we'll see, like, maybe if they capture, like, the characters' ages a little bit better. But the premise has already been set, so I really don't expect much from the other ones either. But, I mean, they're fun, they're quick, and so a 3-star is fine. Like, I'm perfectly fine reading 3-star reads. So if that's what I can expect from the rest of the series as well, I'm fine with that. But, yeah, it just didn't wow me, and I had some problems with it. So there's that one. And then my last 3-star was actually a rollover. And so this was the pick for Autism Reads, which is put on by Christine at An Autistic Reader. This was the pick for May, and I just didn't get to it. And that's A Sisterhood of Secret Ambitions by Shayna Bokweg. And yeah, this one was fine. Again, I did enjoy the premise. So basically you have this secret sisterhood, and there's different kind of levels of them. The group we're following are wives to be. So basically they're being trained to be wives of like powerful men. And that way they can kind of influence behind the scenes these powerful men. Because it's set in the 1920s, I think like 1927. And so women don't really have a voice. But they also help like abused women. They help get them out of the abusive situations. So like you're introduced to the characters. That's their mission, is to get this woman and her children out of this abusive situation. And so like you have the wives to be, you have like the spinsters and the gossips, and they each have different roles. Like some of them are more like assassin type characters. You have the wives to be, which also go on missions and such. You have like the researchers. I think those are the gossips. I couldn't say for sure though, which are like researching the different men and kind of what's happening and such. And so yeah, the premise was fun and cute. It kind of had a Bachelor feel to it because, or like Bachelor, Bachelorette, because basically you have like a priority 1 character, and these wives to be are competing to be chosen by him to be his wife essentially. And he doesn't know, that that's what's going on. The men don't know, but the women do. And so they're basically competing against each other, and they're kind of setting up like meet cutes and such that are tailored to their different strengths. And our main character is kind of taking advantage, like when something arises during another person's date, like she's kind of taking advantage of it to make it work in her favor and such. And yeah, it's cute. It was fun. It just, again, wasn't amazing or anything like that. So it got 3 stars, but it was an enjoyable one. And so I plan on keeping it. Like, it was interesting enough. Then we had 5 4-stars, and the first one was an extra one for Aurelium. I just needed to read it to fulfill an Aurelium prompt, and then I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This one, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the vibes of it. I just don't think the author either explained or fully thought through like the premise of this school. So basically you have the school, and the only way out is to either die or graduate, and the school is kind of sentient. So like the main character Elle, she's like, okay, I decided to do this, I need to just go do it, or otherwise the school will throw, a loophole in. There's no teachers, so the school is giving them, like, assignments and such, and so, like, she's, like, focuses on languages, and she's like, if I see this language, the school's gonna throw that into the mix. And so the school's kind of sentient. There's also these monsters, which is the whole reason the school exists, is because these monsters are attracted to the mana of the students. And so when they're kids, they don't have enough mana that the monsters really care about them. But during their teenage years, their monsters are really attracted to their mana. Where the adults, again, they're more formidable enough, and things have kind of evened out that the monsters don't really go after them either. And so, like, there's these enclaves, which are groups of people that it's kind of coveted. You want to get into an enclave for, like, the protection and such, but they created a school to help protect their children, but then there's a breach, and so their children are being killed, so they end up opening the school to all the children, hoping that the monsters will target the children that aren't part of the enclaves and give their children a better chance of getting out of the school. And that's the part that's confusing. Like, you understand the school's it's created like in a void, and so, like, it doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, things don't always make sense with it because it's kind of just magical and sentient, and there's this void and such. So she explains, like, that, that the school was created because more children were dying without the school than within the school, even though the school's not safe either. And, like, every day is life and death. Like, you have to have a buddy to go anywhere, you have to have a buddy to take a shower, brush your teeth, things like that. But I just don't understand, like, if there's that breach, like, why is there no teachers? Like, I don't understand why there can't be teachers to protect the students. Like, if the monsters aren't as, attracted to them. Like, that's the part I just didn't understand, and maybe I missed something, but I just didn't understand it. And the vibes were fine, and you kind of have this golden boy who, he gets mana from killing the creatures, and he's like the golden boy, and he's just trying to save everybody, so he ends up creating kind of an unbalance because he saves too many students, and so the creatures are basically now starving, or the school. I don't really understand, like, is the school, like, how much the danger is from the school and how much is from the creatures. But basically he creates an unbalance, and so you have the graduating seniors, and now it's extra dangerous for them because these creatures are extra aggressive, and they have to, like, go through the creatures to get out, essentially, and normally half the seniors end up dying and not getting out. And so, yeah, you don't really know that plot, though, till the end. Like, there just doesn't really seem to be a plot. And so, yeah, I enjoyed it. I really liked the vibes. I did struggle with the author's writing, though. There's just, I would have to reread lines, like, the way she would phrase things. It's not necessarily that it was, like, grammatically incorrect or anything. It didn't make sense for my brain, like, the way she would phrase things. And so I would have to reread lines. I had to make sure I really paid attention. And so vibe-wise, like, it would have been 5 stars. But because I struggled with the writing and things weren't fully clear or explained, it ended up just getting 4 stars, which is still a great star rating. But yeah, I do plan on continuing the series at some point. I'm not in a huge hurry, but I would like to continue the series and just see what happens. It does kind of end on a little bit of a cliffhanger. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts there. And then we had... So this one was also an extra one. I had a lot of extra this month, and I started doing theme vlogs. So this theme vlog is already up. I'll link it down below, along with, like, the Winnie the Pooh Hunny videos. And of course, any booktubers I mentioned or anything like that will also be linked down below. But this one was for a Juneteenth vlog. And so I read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This is the only one out of those books that got a 4-star. And that's just because the middle I really struggled with. So you basically have, what is her name? Janie. And her grandma was a slave and kind of wants something better for Janie than just working. So she ends up kind of arranging a marriage to this guy, but this guy actually wants her to like work the land with him and such. And so she meets a different guy and ends up running off with him. And he kind of has grander aspirations. And so he finds this black town because everything's still segregated at this point. And so he finds this black town and starts to build it up, essentially, puts a goods store, a post office. He ends up becoming mayor of it, but he just kind of puts Janie down a lot. And it was clever, like looking back, it was clever how the author did that because during that time, like Janie was just like basically a trophy wife, like an ornament for him. And so you don't get a lot of Janie's viewpoint. Like it is third person, but you would expect, it's about her. She would be present in the story, which she's really not. She's off to the side. It's a lot of dialogue between like the townsfolk and such. And so I struggled, and the dialogue in this was like the dialect of it was very like distinct and strong, and I really really struggled with that as well. I like that aspect. I like when authors do that, but it was just so heavy in this one that I did struggle with it. And the bulk of it is when she's in this town. And then it ends with her third love, who is much younger than her, and they end up running off. And that part I did thoroughly enjoy. There ends up being like this hurricane, and you kind of see Janie is definitely much more present, and you see her like, the other black folk think she's kind of hoity-toity, and you see a difference, from the trophy wife where she's just not allowed to have a voice, not allowed to do anything, and she's just all polished and dressed up, to, hey, I'll wear overalls, I'll go out there and work with you. And then there's this hurricane and things happen. And so it was just that middle part I really struggled with, and the dialect I really struggled with, which made it less than 5 stars for me. So there was that one. Then we had another one which actually would have gone well for the reading vlog, but I was reading it for something else. And so this was for Tarzan, and it was Found Mother. And this was also another one I needed to read for my Aurelium prompts. And so this is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. And again, this would have worked really, really well for that prompt. This takes place in 1960s, I think, South Carolina. Yes. And you have the civil rights movement. And so that's taking place during that. And basically you have a young white girl, and her mother died, and so she has like a black nanny who takes care of her. And she wants to go sign up to vote because they can vote now, and ends up making comments to like the 3 most racist men in town. And so the little girl, what is her name? Jeez Louise. I'm horrible with names. Lily. So Lily, her father's kind of abusive and such. And he tells her that her mother left her. And she only came back when she died. She had only come back for her stuff, not for her. And so that makes Lily mad. And so she decides she's going to save her black stand-in mother, Rosaline, I want to say is her name. But anyway, so she's gonna save her, and then they end up running. She has this picture of her mom and like this black Madonna, and it says this town. And so she decides they're gonna go there, and they end up finding these 3 black sisters who have a beekeeping like farm, and make honey. And so they get taken in by these black sisters, and she's trying to, discover about her mom. And it's really like a coming of age, and you're seeing like she kind of has this white lens on things, as far as like the civil rights movement and such, and like the blacks. And like Rosaline, she's like, just don't say anything, like just move along, not, realizing like their experience, I guess. And so yeah, This one would have been 5 stars as well. I really, really enjoyed it. But there's these things that happen like smack in the middle that just felt like they were put there for dramatic effect. Like the one was like, okay, this happened, so this other thing can happen, and that just didn't really seem like it needed to happen. And so I I didn't enjoy that part. Like, I don't like things that are just kind of for dramatic effect, and it didn't really make sense to me. And so that's the only reason why it got dropped down. Otherwise, I really, really enjoyed this one. And so there's that. Then we had our next one. So this one was for the bookworm spirit animal. And I have like this animal oracle deck. And for this one, we got horse, which is freedom, is kind of the meaning behind that. And so for this one, I went with 1000 White Women, The Journals of May Dodd by Jim Fergus. And this is the other book for my ABC title challenge that I needed to read this month. And this one, I almost gave 5 stars because I really did enjoy it. But after thinking on it further and looking at some other reviews that had some points, I was like, you know what? It really is more of a 4-star. Generally, I don't really let other people's reviews sway me one way or the other. But thinking about it after the fact, it was like, yeah, I can see their point, and it really did kind of. So basically, one of the critiques, the big critiques that kind of made it drop down is like the terminology wasn't quite accurate, like the way the main character speaks wasn't accurate. So it's told, like in journal format, kind of the thoughts of May Dodd. And she is a woman who gets sent to this insane asylum for being promiscuous and living with a man out of wedlock. And so they think her well-to-do family thinks she's crazy and sends her to an insane asylum. So it's not. It takes like historical. It has some real historical figures and takes like one historical event with like the peace talks between the Plains Native Americans and the government. It takes that, but it completely fictionalizes it. So while you do have some real historical characters, they're completely fictionalized as far as their actions. Because basically, during the peace talks, this author decides that maybe as like an alternate history type thing, that the one chief asked for 1,000 white women because their culture is a matrimonial line, and so like if you have two tribes, that two people from two tribes, the child will be raised in the other tribe, the mother's tribe essentially, but it will have access to both tribes, so it'll be part of its mother's people, but still be able to get the culture and such from the other tribe and be welcome there. And so that's kind of the thought, is you'll give us 1,000 white women, and then our children will be part of your tribe, of the white people, the white settlers that are taking over. Well, of course, everybody's appalled by this, and they know they can't force like women to do it, so they decide to offer women in insane asylums or prison that are child of that are of childbearing age, offer them the chance to go into this program. And if they do it, they just have to stay with the Native Americans until they either have a baby or for 2 years, and then they're completely free. And so May Dodd, is like, yes, like, I don't belong in here. Like, we weren't married, but I loved the man I was with, and we had 2 children, and my children got taken away, and I'm just trapped here, and she's being assaulted in the insane asylum and such. So she goes, she meets a I want to say army captain. Let's see here. Yeah, Army Captain John Burke. She meets him and kind of has an affair with him, and they're very drawn to each other. But then she goes and is the bride of the chief, Little Wolf. And so she's, her and this handful of other women go and are part of this Native American community. I really liked how you had, this sisterhood again, like they're fish out of water. They're all kind of in the same boat, so you really connect. You have some very distinct characters. Another critique I saw is people didn't like how like the names and such reflected, and like the dialect and whatnot of the character reflected that character. So like you have a Southern Belle, and her name and her dialect reflects that. You have these two Irish twin sisters, and their names and their dialect reflect that. You have this artist that paints birds, and her name is Helen Flight. I personally appreciated that because I knew exactly which character was it was without having to think about it, because I really struggle to keep characters straight. So I actually appreciated that. There is also a lot of different like trauma, a lot of assault and such that these women experience. Like at one point they get taken from their tribe by an enemy tribe and they get assaulted. The Native Americans get drunk at one point and they get assaulted. And there was some critiques about how the women just seemed to get over it, and like this author didn't really know how to write women. And I didn't feel that necessarily. Like I kind of see where people are coming from. I didn't necessarily feel that. You're really getting May Dodd's point, and she like just the way she was presented throughout, like I could see her reacting that way to the assaults. But like some people felt like that women just got over it too quickly, but you don't really get the other people's viewpoints. And he doesn't really go through like how they process the trauma at all. So I can see where they're coming from on that aspect. But I honestly thought you had like a variety of different personalities and different women and such. So I personally like that, but do keep in mind if you are interested in reading, there is a lot of assault. And at one point, the one character ends up aborting her baby. So that's part of it too. So keep that in mind. But I actually really enjoyed this overall. There was a lot of parts, like I wasn't planning on tabbing it, but I did tab, a couple parts. And this one, I just want to say, it says, your power as a woman, as a mother, is your medicine, and it saved you. Take your courage from that. And so I like that little saying. Like, there's others in here as well. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this. Like, I like the historical setting, kind of the alternate history of what if, this chief asked for 1,000 white women, what would happen and such. It does have another scene with babies from an enemy tribe that this tribe does something to, which is horrific. So there are things with babies, and there are things with the women being assaulted. So just keep that in mind if you are interested in picking this up, but I really enjoyed it. So there is that. Then we had, this one was another bookworm, and it was a booktube pick. And so this one I went with The Diviners by Libba Bray. I chose this one because Amy at A Star Reads did her Love is Blind series, and this was one of the top contenders, and that kind of brought this one to my attention. And then I've had it sitting on my shelf for a while. This was another one I used for Aurelium, and so when that one came up, I was like, it's perfect book for it. And yeah, this was another one I really, really enjoyed. And I enjoyed the two components of it separate, but the way they were interwoven together just didn't quite work for me, which is why it got dropped down a little bit. But basically, you have, I believe her name's Evie. I don't have a dust jacket, so I can't double check myself. She gets into some trouble and gets sent to live with her uncle, who has like a museum for the occult, and the police end up contacting him because they have like this murder that appears occult in nature, and so they end up contacting him. But Evie actually has occult powers, like supernatural powers. When she touches objects, she gets impressions from those objects. And so she kind of becomes a part of this murder investigation as well. And then you have other people throughout the storyline that have supernatural powers, and they're called the Diviners. And there's kind of a little bit of like a prophecy element that the Diviners are gonna have to come together, like something dark is coming. And so basically you have like the two sides. You kind of have the murder mystery and like 1920s life in New York City. And so they're partying. You have the Ziegfeld girls, like flappers and things like that. So you get like that side of the story. And then you have like the occult side of the story. And I really like you have like this little song like Naughty John, and kind of like lore, urban legend type feel to him. Um, and he basically kind of gets summoned back. And so he's kind of this evil. And so it's Naughty John. And then, you have the murder mystery aspect where they're trying to figure out. And then you have these other diviners. I really wish the diviners, like, they intersect at some moments, but they don't really come together. And I really wish they had come together in this one a little bit more. And like I said, I liked both aspects. I like kind of just like the 1920s NYC life aspect and the murder mystery aspect. And then the cult aspect I loved, but that cult aspect just wasn't as strong as I was expecting. It was interwoven throughout, but I really wish that had been more of the forefront. I think I would have enjoyed this a little bit more. And yeah, overall though, I absolutely loved it. The vibes are definitely 5 stars. Like, I love kind of that urban legend, the Naughty John little song that goes along with him and such. And Evie as a character I didn't really like. Like, I did not like her, so that probably colored it too. But at the same time, I don't mind if there's an unlikable character. Like, I don't have to like the character to enjoy the book. But yeah, it just kind of felt a little bit short for me. I do have the second one. I am hoping when I read that one, I'll enjoy it a bit more. Because I'm hoping now, that we're going to be progressing in the series and the diviners are kind of going to be hopefully more at the forefront. I'm hoping I'll enjoy it more. So that was all my 4 stars. And then I had 13 5-star reads. So the first one is the one I used to replace Forrest Gump. Normally I wouldn't have worried about it, but I was playing my Winnie the Pooh Hunny, my bingo game, and I was like, I need something to fulfill that. And it was like the shortest book on the TBR. I need to fulfill that. So I was like, I'll try to find something else for the sweet candy rep. And so I decided to go with Clifford's Halloween because you have trick-or-treating, which is, of course, candy. And, of course, this is the bottom just because it's a children's picture book. So it's not going to be as high up as some of the others, but at the same time, I love the Clifford books. I think for the age range they're for, they're perfect, they're cute. In this one, you have, like what he was last Halloween. Like, it starts off with the different holidays, but their favorite is Halloween. And then they were trying to decide what he should be for Halloween, and then he decided he wanted to be a ghost. And then the Halloween activities, and then wondering what he should be this year. And so yeah, I just think they're cute. They're perfect for the age range. They kind of bring that excitement as far as like the holiday goes. I've read mostly as an adult. I've reread the holiday ones. This was my one reread, by the way, because I read it all the time as a kid. And so yeah, I thought this was adorable, and it just an easy 5 stars because I absolutely love the Clifford books. Then we had, this one was my pick for Buzzword, so it was an extra one because I wasn't able to work it on to the official TBR, and the Buzzword is put on by Books and Lala, again, linked down below, and it was repeating words. So I had The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon, and of course the is repeated 3 times. This one I really loved. It probably should have been more of a 4-star, but I just got such enjoyment out of it, and I thought the autism rep was fantastic. Now, the author doesn't officially say that the character has autism. He didn't really put a label on it. He didn't do any research or anything like that. And I kind of have mixed feelings. Like, on one hand, I'm like, since he didn't do any research or anything, it does kind of make sense that he wouldn't put that label. But at the same time, I almost wish he had done research, and he hadn't shied away from that label. And also he went with the very stereotypical of young man with autism, a boy with autism that is highly intelligent in math and loves trains, which that is very stereotypical. And there's nothing fine, like, that does fit. It's the stereotype for a reason. But I wish he had maybe chosen a different special interest or something like that. And if he had done his research, he kind of would have been able to. But the author really captured what it was like to be like overwhelmed sensory wise, overstimulation, the fear when you have to go somewhere new. Just he really captured what that's like. And so I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very unique. The math stuff was way over my head, but it fit for this character, so it's over my head, but that's fine. But basically, you have Christopher, and he goes to the special needs school, and he says that he does have behavioral problems and such. But he witnesses, well, he doesn't witness it. He finds one of the neighbor's dogs murdered and in the yard, and at first he kind of suspect because he picks up the dog and he's like holding it, and then the owner comes running out like, what did you do? And it's like, it wasn't him. He likes dogs and he felt bad for the dog, and so he decides he's gonna be a detective and try to find out what happened to this dog. And his teacher at the school encourages him to write a story, so he's gonna write this murder mystery story about trying to find the murderer of this dog. And so that's what you're reading, is the story that he's writing. But it's very like stream of consciousness, and like I said, it really does capture how overwhelming it can be, when he gets touched and not liking hugs, which I hate hugs. It really captured the feeling, like how it feels while you're inside this character's head. And what I particularly enjoyed, the other autism books, like with autism reps that I have read, the books that I have read, they're normally characters that have lower support needs and are like higher masking, where this is the first one I read that the character has higher support needs and doesn't mask. Like, he is just what he is, and I really, really like that, because I don't think like people understand that. That especially, like, that's why women in particular, like, they get diagnosed later, because we do mask. And so I really like that aspect, that he just wasn't masking and that he did have higher support needs. And there's kind of things that happen, and he ends up kind of going on a trip, and he's kind of on his own, which reminded me of, I can't remember the name of the movie. I'll try to find it and insert a picture here, but it had Dakota Fanning, and she ends up like going on like this trip on her own because she has this thing in mind. And I really enjoyed that movie, and that's kind of what the end of this book felt like a little bit. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought, even though it's not officially an autism rep, it was me, Anna. She heard me knock the book into the wall. Anna, freeze! Anyway, even though it wasn't officially an autism rep book, like, he captured it. So I enjoyed that one. Then we had Spy Family Volume 1. This was for my character pick because we got Kenga and Rue, which is either a manga, graphic novel, or a children's book. And so I went with Spy Family, which is of course a manga, and this is by Tatsuya Endo. And this one was so cute. I've been wanting to read this for a while, and luckily I have the second one, so I'll be able to jump into the second one right away. But I figured this is one I would enjoy. Like, I'm not a huge manga reader. Death Note's the only manga I've read. I've read a couple I think I've only read one graphic novel, actually. So, I'm not big as far as manga and graphic novels, but this one was so cute. So basically, you have Twilight, and he is a spy, and he gets an assignment, and his assignment is for this guy who's like basically a recluse, and only really comes out for like school events, and so he needs to infiltrate the school, and so he adopts a daughter, not knowing she's a telepath, And so she knows that he's a spy because she can read his mind. And then he ends up getting a wife who's an assassin. So the little girl, Anya, knows knows that he's a spy, and her mom is a telepath. And so this first one is just about them trying to get her into the school because it's a very prestigious, like, elite school. And so yeah, it was so cute. I was wondering how, like, the assassin and spy would come together, and it all made sense and everything. And yeah, it's just adorable. And the artwork is a lot of fun. And so yeah, I'm definitely planning on continuing the series. I absolutely loved it. And so there's that one. Then we had another one, which was also for Aurelium, and it was also for a bookworm, which was a backlist book. It's not wanting to focus. So backlist book, and I went with Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is the third one in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And of course, there's more in, like, the whole Grishaverse, which I've really enjoyed these books so far. The second one I didn't love as much. I still really enjoyed it, and there was, like, kind of a seafaring aspect that I really enjoyed in that one. And so I wasn't sure how I would feel about this one, but I really loved it. The second one, her and her best friend Mal, Alina, and Mal, they have, like, some angst and strife between them, which got really annoying in the second one. That was still a little bit in here, but Mal kind of has, like, a different mindset in this one. And so it wasn't as grating in this book, which I appreciated. And yeah, some things happen, which I can't really go into. But basically, in these books, you have Alina and Mal, and they're part of, like, these soldiers, and there's this scar, or the fold, or the unsea, which is just this, like, dark patch that splits the kingdom. And so they're crossing the fold, and they get attacked, and Alina brings light and ends up saving them because there's these creatures in there. And so she ends up being pulled into the Grisha, which are the people with the magical powers, and there's different type of Grisha, and such, and they kind of explain the different types. But she's a Sunbringer, and then there's the Darkling who, like, brings shadows and such, and he kind of runs the Grisha, or the second army. And so she gets pulled in there, but there's kind of more going on. There's a little bit of a political nature to these, with the kingdom and such. And there's also these different creatures which have amplifiers, which or are amplifiers for her. And so each book, they're focusing on a different creature and trying to get that amplifier, along with the main plot of the book, and, like, the political aspect and such. So I really like this. I did like how it wrapped up, even though there's kind of different love triangle things going on, or square more like. There's different potential love interests for Alina, and I didn't like the one that she ended up with, but it worked. It worked for the story, and I did like how it wrapped up and everything. And I'm excited I finally finished this because now I can move on to the duology, in the Grishaverse, which is the Six of Crows duology, of course. So, did really enjoy this. Obviously, got 5 stars, and so there's that one. And then let's see here. Next, we had one, it was an extra. I listened to it as an audiobook because with these books, I think the audiobook is the way to go. And that is Leather and Lark by Bryn Weaver. Excuse me. So the audiobook, like, you have the two viewpoints, Lachlan and Lark. And so what's different about these audiobooks is, like, even though it might be from, like, Lark's point of view, when Lachlan says something, or has, when they're having dialogue back and forth, Lachlan will say his part. So the voice narrator for Lachlan will say his part, and then Lark will say her part. Even though the point of view of the chapter is from one character or the other, it doesn't do just the chapter point of view changes. It's the banter back and forth, which I really, really like that. I think that's a great way, even though it's not full cast audio. I love that it has that component. And yeah, overall, like, I absolutely love this. Not as much as Butcher and Blackbird. Like, I adored Butcher and Blackbird. I really like those characters together. This one, there was definitely some cringy moments. Which I was watching Bex Reads, and she was talking about this one, and she hated this one. And I can see where she's coming from. Like, there is like giggling, which did kind of, it didn't ruin it for me, but I can see where she's coming from. And then there's like the song, because Lark is a musician, and she also does crafts with bodies, because she's also a serial killer. And that song was a bit cringy too. And he has a tendency to growl, which just kind of was like a bit cringy to me. But the story itself and like the banter, and you also have Ethel, who is Lark's like aunt. And so yeah, overall I really still enjoyed it. Obviously I gave it 5 stars. But basically, on the first one you have Sloane and Rowan, and they're the couple from the first one. Well, her family, somebody's targeting them, and they think it might be Rowan or Lachlan. And so she decides she needs to protect her friend, and her Ethel is kind of her like sounding board, and she's like, you need to marry Lachlan, and because your family won't respect anything other than if you tie his family to ours. And so it's a fake marriage, kind of forced proximity, and Lark has a lot of trauma from, what happened at her school. There are a lot of trigger warnings for this, which it tells you right off the bat, so definitely keep those in mind. But yeah, she she has a lot of trauma, and I didn't love her as a serial killer as much as Sloane. I almost wish she wasn't. And Lachlan is a killer for hire. Like, he kind of works for this guy, and he wants to get out of the business, but the guy is kind of like blackmailing him essentially. And so yeah, they end up doing this marriage of convenience, and it's a little bit enemy-esque to lovers. Like, they have a misunderstanding right off the bat. And then, like I said, you have that forced proximity and such. But yeah, I think these are such a great time. It's my kind of humor. I like how lighthearted it is, tied in with the darker themes. And so I really enjoyed this one overall. So there's that. And I think the third one I'm gonna enjoy the most. I think that brother, he's like a doctor, and he seems a little bit more reserved and such, and I think he's going to be my favorite brother. And I like Rose, who is the love interest for that one. So I think the third one I'm going to enjoy the most, and I can't wait till it comes out. Then next we got, I don't have it, I don't own a copy, I listened to it audio, and that is Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler. And so this one was obviously an extra one. It was for Tales from Two Trails, which is put on from Kim at Expedition Through Pages. It was the group read for Team B, which is the team I'm on, and so it worked in for also the Juneteenth vlog. It wasn't originally going to be part of that, but it worked. And so yeah, I listened to that one, and that one obviously gave it 5 stars, but it just made me mad. Like, you have Doro, and he's kind of like this immortal spirit, and he takes possession of other people's bodies, and he's lived obviously centuries and such, and so he basically has a breeding program for humans with supernatural abilities, and so he's like cultivating them essentially, and so he makes matches, and it doesn't matter whether it's brother and sister or not, so there's like this ancestral thing there as well. And wild seeds are people with supernatural abilities that he finds, but he hasn't bred himself. So the main character Anwanyu, what's her name? I can't remember her name. Anyway, so he finds her. And she also has the ability to live a long life because she can heal herself, and she can reverse her aging and change her appearance and such. And so she's the first supernatural person he's found that has the ability to live a long time. And so he wants her for himself, so he kind of covets her, but he also pairs her with his son and then also a bunch of other people, like just whoever he chooses. He ends up pairing her with one guy because as a punishment, essentially. And so yeah, it's just disgusting. Like what he's doing is disgusting, and like the whole incestuous thing. And so yeah, he's trying to breed these people. And I was fully on board, like even with how disgusting he was, but the way it ended, it just made me really mad. It just made me mad. I was not happy with the ending. It is, I think it's just a duology, maybe. Or no, that one I think has more. It's the other book that's a duology. So anyway, it is a series. I am just mad right now. I will probably continue on with the series at some point, but I need to get over being mad at Doro. And just undisgusted by the way it ended in general before I can continue on. But really well written. It does, it takes place, like from the times of slavery and such. So it does have that slavery aspect as well. Then we have two more Octavia E. Butlers. They all kind of fell in the same spot. The next one is Fledgling. This one I really enjoyed. The only reason it's lower than the other one is because it has the main character in this one is in like a 11-year-old body. She's a 53-year-old vampire, so mentally she's older, especially in regards to like humans. But she is in a 10-year-old body and she is a child by vampire standards. So basically, you have different families of vampires, and the females and the males live apart, and then they have like they make arrangements for like breeding their children together and such. Um, and with this one, she ends up finding a human. Like her family gets targeted, and there's like also like bioengineering or genetic engineering in this as well. And so she's a black vampire, where all the others are like pale skin and white. But her family has been trying to find a way where they can tolerate sun and be less vulnerable, because right now, like they're completely unconscious during the day. They don't have the ability to wake up and they burn in the sun, where she has the ability to stay awake throughout the day as long as she gets enough sleep at some point. And when the sun does burn her a little bit, it's more like a sunburn. It just doesn't full on burn her. And so that's kind of like the genetic engineering component. That melanin is what's helping with that. Well, somebody's targeting their family because they don't like that. And so she's the survivor, and she ends up on the road and she finds this human. And there ends up being a sexual relationship with them. And even though like you kind of have to like get over that block, like this is a 10-11-year-old girl with an adult male, because like one, mentally she's older than the human. Even though by vampire standards she's a kid, but also like with the vampiric powers, like that sexual component is very much a part of it. And so he, like, if you there's a lot of depth to this one, because he's actually the one like that doesn't necessarily have the consent, because she bit him. There's like the venom and such, and so he ends up kind of being tied to her. And so it's really kind of interesting how that flipped. Like not only does it show the power of like, yes, she's a child, so she is being discounted and such, but also as far as like the abuse narrative, like she's kind of the one in the power there in that relationship. So it's just kind of like, if you really kind of deep dive into it, it's very, very interesting. But it ends up, kind of a coming together of a bunch of different vampire family, like the powerful vampire families, to kind of address, the attack on her family and the reasoning behind it and such, which is the genetic engineering and the fact that she's black. So really, really interesting. Like, there's a lot more depth to it than you would think just going in. And like I said, if you can kind of get over that initial aspect of she's in a 10/11-year-old body and is with this adult man, it works. So, but I can understand that, could be very, very triggering. And so just be aware of that in case it is triggering to you. But there's a lot more depth to that book. Then we have the last one, which not the last one I read for Juneteenth, but the last Octavia E. Butler book I read, and that's Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. And there is one more in this one. And so this one actually takes place from July 2024 through 2027. So that was really interesting. And it's a dystopian. And basically the main character lives in like this walled off community. Her father's a Baptist preacher. And so they're pretty safe in the walled community. But outside of it, like, it's just, things are falling apart. There's a lot of violence, a lot of assault and such. And so she knows, like, that there's going to come a time where they're going to have to do something. They're not going to stay safe in this walled community. Like, the outside's already kind of encroaching in. And basically, there's very little water to be had. And so water's like at a premium and such. And so eventually it does. The outside comes in, and she ends up on the run, and she kind of meets up with these different people. Initially 2 people from her community, and it's kind of interesting because she has hyper empathy, and so when somebody gets injured and such, she can feel that, and so she's having to deal with that. And then there's one of the people from the community that she meets up with after the attack is basically a slave. So she got sold as a, like, additional wife to one of the men in the community. And there is slavery in this, like, people are being sold. And it's like under the guise, oh, like, work for us, but they can never get out of debt, essentially. And for some reason, the slavers want people with hyper empathy, and I didn't really understand that. So anyway, they're trying to get up to, I think, Oregon or Washington or something. And so they're going along this path, but obviously there's danger, and they're kind of picking up people along the way. And so yeah, it was really interesting, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, a lot more kind of depth, and it was interesting to see kind of like the comparisons, because this was written in 1980 something, and kind of the comparison for what she thought. 1993, so not 80s, but 1993, but kind of what she thought the world might look like in 2024 and what the world is right now. It was really, really interesting. So I like that one. Then we had our next one. And so this one was a bookworm, and it was same book as Last Person. I love this prompt. Normally with this prompt, I would go into town to like Barnes and Noble, and I would ask them what the last book they sold was. I'm mentally just was not in the place to do that. So what I did, I went to BookTube, and I just typed in book haul, and then I found the first recent one, because like it had one that was like 3 months old or something. So I went to the first recent one, which was only 2 days old, and that was from Kaylin, no, Ashlyn Kaylee or something like that. Let me see where is it? Ashlyn Kaylee, again, I'll link that down below. And they had done a book haul on May 1st. And one of the books that they had hauled was Funny Story by Emily Henry. And out of the books they hauled, this was the only one that I was really interested in. This was my first Emily Henry book, and I absolutely loved it. I do have 2 other books. I just hauled Happy Place, which I'm excited to get to at some point. And then I have one of like their older, lesser known works, A Million Junes, as well. And so yeah, this was my first one and I loved it. And this one really caught my attention and I thought it would be something I love. Because basically you have these two main characters, and each of their fiancés. So her fiance decides he's in love with his childhood best friend, which is his girlfriend. And they decide they're in love with each other and leave these two. And she's living with her fiance and basically dropped her whole life to come and live with him. And so she's kind of in a rut. And so he's like, you can move in with me. I have, there's an extra bedroom, there's a spare bedroom. And so it's kind of forced proximity, opposites attract, like a little bit of a grumpy sunshine vibe. And so yeah, they're living together. He's kind of more like a stoner. He's playing a lot of sad music. He's always running late, very friendly, and everybody just gravitates towards him. Where she's more very kind of socially awkward, doesn't always know how to communicate the best, a stickler for like routine and organizing. Like she has a calendar where everything is on. And it doesn't say that she's neurodivergent, but reading her, like, she's neurodivergent. And I thought that rep was fantastic. And so, yeah, they end up fake dating because they're living together and they end up getting wedding invitations from their exes. And so they end up getting drunk and then decide that they're going to RSVP. And so her ex calls her up and it's like, you don't have to come. Like, I know it's going to be awkward for you, especially alone. And she's like, I won't be alone. And it's like, well, you didn't do a +1. And she's like, because he has his own invitation. And basically says they're dating when they're not. And so then they kind of do fake dating and such. And it's just, the vibes were so good. I really liked them together. I liked her as a character, that anxiety and that social awkwardness and such. Like, absolutely loved her. And yeah, I will say, like, something happens. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding, which it made sense, sort of. But I never been so disappointed in a character. And normally I don't get disappointed with the character, but yeah, I was very disappointed with the character. And I had such a great time with this. Like, I absolutely loved it. So there is that one. Then we have, let's see here. So this is the last one for the Juneteenth reading vlog. And so it was just another extra. And that's The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This one, I was familiar with the movie. Again, a movie I watched several times growing up. And I love this. Again, you had that strong dialect. But in this one, it wasn't, like, it was just enough that it came across, but not so much that it was hard to understand what they were saying, which I really enjoyed. It's told in, like, through letters. So at first the main character is writing God and then she's writing her sister. And so basically it's about these two sisters. And geez Louise. Why can I not remember names? Celie? So basically Celie gets married off to this man and he's kind of abusive, kind of puts her down and such. And then her sister ends up going to be a missionary in Africa, runs away from their father at one point and comes and stays with her for a little while. And then when she doesn't accept the advances of Celie's husband, she ends up running off and becoming a missionary in Africa. But Celie doesn't know if she's alive or dead. And so even when she's writing letters to her, she still doesn't fully know. And yeah, it's just absolutely beautiful. You do have kind of a found family aspect. And Celie, again, is a little bit more of like a lower IQ. Maybe, I wouldn't necessarily say she's like fully like mentally handicapped, but just a little bit more simple of a person. And I really like the other women in the story are always telling her, like, you need to fight, like, you need to stand up for yourself. And her husband has a mistress who he's been in love with for a long time. And Celie and that mistress end up kind of having a relationship. So it does have LGBTQIA rep. And yeah, it's just, you really see the growth of Celie even through the letters, which I think was really, really well done. And so yeah, there does deal with a lot of abuse and such, so keep that in mind. But it was beautiful about her really, kind of growing up and learning to forgive a little bit. And the thing with her husband, like, he's so bitter and abusive, but you see that different side to him because of or Shug. And so you really see that different side to him because he's a different person with her. And so they're able to kind of bond, and she's able to kind of forgive him because of his relationship to Shug. And I really, just really enjoyed this one. So there's that one. Then let's see here. Then this worked for um, Tales from Two Trails, and it also was Rumpelstiltskin name in the title, and it also worked for Aurelium as well. So this is Sadie by Courtney Summers, and this one is mixed media. So it's alternating between a podcast and transcripts, and then first person view of the main character, Sadie. So basically, Sadie ends up running away from home. Her little sister, her 13-year-old sister, gets assaulted and brutally murdered. And so she's searching for the killer, and runs away from home. And then this podcast, he gets sent on assignment to try to find her. And so he's following the trails of where she went, and then you're getting first person from her. And it's just like you have that poverty, that addiction. Again, you do have the assault of minors, and so a trigger warning for that. But it was just so impactful. I like kind of that, like, she's on the search and she's on the run trying to find this person. And it was just so good. Like, I haven't heard a lot about this, but the people who've talked about it just loved it, and so it's been on my radar, and I'm glad I finally was able to read this because it was fantastic. I absolutely loved that one. Then let's see here. Then these next two were so hard. I couldn't decide which to put where, but I ended up putting this one number 2, but it will take the top spot in my top 3, which I'll talk about in a second. But this was for Moana, which was Island Rep, and this is one I hauled fairly recently at a thrift store, and it was Moloka'i by Alan Brennert. This was so amazing. This was my last read of June. I got so emotional at points. It was so well done. It was very historically accurate from what I looked up and read a little bit in the author's note in the back. But basically, you're following 7-year-old Rachel, from like 1890s Hawaii all the way to like 1970s. And so originally, Hawaii has a king and such, and then he ends up dying, and then the queen gets, ousted by the US government and such. And like those are real historical figures and such. And like some of the people on the leper, so basically Rachel gets leprosy and gets sent to Moloka'i. So she gets separated from her family, gets sent to Moloka'i, and it's following her throughout her whole life. And so there's a lot of different changes, obviously, from 1890s to 1970s. There's a lot that happens, World War II and such, and there's like the scene where they're standing there on the island looking over towards, I think, Oahu, and lots of historical stuff going on, but the main focus is on leprosy, and this was a real leprosy colony. And it's just so heartbreaking because she's 7 years old and she gets separated from her family. Her uncle is actually on the island because he has leprosy as well, but the nuns of the island, there's like these nuns and this boarding school for girls, and they refuse to let her stay with her uncle. And so she gets separated from him, and she has leprosy, and she just doesn't understand. And it's following her throughout her whole life, and there's so much loss throughout her life. But there's also a lot of life lived, and so it was so beautiful. You had all that historical component, and I loved it. Like, I absolutely love this. And it's not something like you see a lot about, So I really enjoyed that one. But the one that ended up taking top spot was June's pick for Autism Reads, and that was Good Different by Meg Eden Kuyat. And I forgot to say, I did listen mostly to Parable of the Sower. And I did listen to Leather and Lark. So Wild Seed, Parable of the Sower, and Leather and Lark were my 3 audiobooks. And I actually read this one digitally. I loved it so much I ended up but getting a physical copy right away. I had some credit on my Amazon card, and so I only paid like $2 for this. But this is told in verse, so it's more like little poems and such. And yeah, you basically have Selah, and she basically is again high masking autistic, so she's like following these rules, but she kind of gets to 7th grade and things just kind of start falling apart. She gets very overwhelmed. She ends up hitting another classmate. She ends up losing a lot of friends, and she's trying to follow these rules, but she doesn't understand, and so she's trying to follow these rules, but it's just not working for her. And it really not only took me back to 7th grade, but I could relate to it today. And so this one has been my favorite of all the autism reads we have done. And like I said, I knew I wanted I wanted a copy. It starts off, she's in, what does it say? I gotta tell you this because it just makes me crack, because we call Walmart Hellmart, because it's rough. It's rough there. Yeah, the first time I broke down in front of anyone was in the middle of the evil place, Walmart. I love that. We live in a smaller town. We only have Walmart and then like a local independent a grocery store that doesn't have like a lot of variety and options. So we kind of are forced to shop at Walmart. I do try to go to the other store when I'm able. But yeah, that just cracked me up because like I hate Walmart. And yeah, I absolutely love this. Like this one is a great one to pick up whether you're autistic yourself, you want to understand autism more, you have a kid who's autistic, because this is a middle grade. But yeah, it's told in verse and just little snippets and such, and it was just so well done, and it really captured what it's like, and you're trying so hard to follow the rules, but you don't understand, and it's just not working anyway, you know? So I absolutely love that one as well. So that's it as far as all the books I read. I know this video is getting way, way long. As far as my top 3, number 1 was Moloka'i by Alan Brennert, and I liked the lesser known history aspect. I didn't know anything about the leprosy colony on Hawaii, Moloka'i. I didn't know anything about that. So I like that you have that lesser known history. I like the kind of Hawaiian culture and setting. You have one character who she's very much more traditional, and she's a healer. And then you have the white healers too that are on this colony. But she tells a lot of like the old folklore stories and such, and all more of the traditional teachings and whatnot. I like the time span. I like how it spanned from the 1890s, and you see sort of like there's all these changes, but she's stuck on this leprosy colony, and there's not a lot of changes there. But towards the end, she is able to go, and you see the changes in the world. So I really like the timeline and the time span of this. The strength of the characters, because all the characters have leprosy, and so they are like so resilient, and they're living their lives the best they can. Like they're creating life for themselves on this colony with other people. There's also one character who is trans, which I really enjoyed that character, and I really liked that. And I don't remember, and I could be completely wrong, so take this with a grain of salt, but I remember seeing something, and it talked about like how there was like a gender fluidity to the Hawaiian culture, in some instances, but I can't remember where I saw that, and I didn't look it up or anything. But I really like that character anyway. But anyway, you have these really, really strong characters, and especially seeing so much loss. Like, they were very strong and they still made a life for themselves. The second spot I gave to is actually The Secret Life of Bees by Sumonk Kid. I love the beekeeping element. Like, who doesn't love bees, you know? And you got little snippets about the bees, and they played a part throughout, which I loved. The found family aspect, I really liked, especially because it was more like found mothers. And so she's this young white girl, and she's finding all these black mothers who are taking care of her when she doesn't have anybody else. So I love the Southern setting, 1964 setting, with the Civil War or Civil Acts movement. I really enjoyed that. I do wish that had been a more prevalent part of it. That and like kind of the struggle between the races and like the prejudice and such. I wish that had been more prevalent, but I still really enjoyed that. And then the coming of age aspects, and you really do see her, like, she does kind of have that white lens on her, and then as she's living with these women and such, she's starting to, grow up a little bit and see things in a little bit of a different light. So I really like that. And then the last spot goes to Sadie by Courtney Summers. The mixed media element, like, I didn't never really read mixed media until I think this year, and I'm finding that I actually really like mixed media. It's something I've been enjoying when I've read it. I like the open ending, and I typically don't. Like, typically, I don't like open endings. I want to know what happens. I want it all wrapped up in a pretty little bow. But in this case, it really worked for the story, and it really added that impact to the story. The relationship between the sisters is a complicated relationship. There's definitely some resentment there, and I liked how, even though the relationship is complicated and such, like, you still see that Sadie would do anything for her sister. So I like that aspect. And then last, that travel slash, excuse the dogs, the travel slash searching element. Like, I really enjoyed that as well. Boo boo, boo boo. I really enjoyed that. Like, not so much as boo boo, come here, boo boo. It's not really so much like a scavenger hunt, but like, she's on the search, she's trying to reveal these secrets and find this person, and she's having to travel and follow the clues, and then the podcast guy is following those clues too. I just really enjoyed that. So that's the third one. And yeah, so that is where we're at. I know this video is extra long, but I read 23 books. I'm not surprised it ended up going this long. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in reading any of these books, what your favorite read from June was. I would love to know that down below. If you just want to support the channel by leaving a comment and let me know you are here, you can always leave a rabbit or any type of animal emoji or leave a bee emoji. Yeah, just leave me something down below, and I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.